Exposure doesn't pay the bills, or does it? This is always a complex discussion when I see it held in groups, and there is a lot of opinions on the topic. So I thought today I would stimulate your thoughts on this topic and make you look at it from maybe my perspective and why I think exposure can pay in some situations, but it certainly can't in others. Welcome to the FAQ Business Podcast for business owners, covering 4 pillars: actionable education, inspiring leaders, businesses like you, and thought leadership, where we challenge your thinking. Hosted by myself, Jane Tweedy, I'm founder and lead trainer of FAQ Business Training, where we want to avoid you getting ripped off or ripping yourself off. We'll feature an amazing diversity of guests with lots to educate and inspire you. Let's jump into today's episode of the FAQ Business Podcast. Welcome to Season 2, Episode 7 of the FAQ Business Podcast. Today's discussion is around exposure. Getting exposure instead of getting paid, or portfolio building, for instance. Many of you, when we first start out, will need to look at portfolio building. Say, for instance, you're a photographer. Until you do headshots, then it's very hard to sell headshots to others. So building a portfolio can help you to build that customer base, build some fans, and get you started. It helps to give some social proof because people can actually see what you can do and you're capable of, but also gets that feedback from others. Do bear in mind, if you are portfolio building, there can be rules about asking for things like 5-star reviews. You can only offer people to do reviews, and if somebody has received your product or service for free, they probably should be stating that in their review. And in some cases, there is now restrictions coming up, particularly in Australia, around things like influence, for instance, receiving product in exchange for providing reviews on healthcare products. So please make sure you're aware of the rules and the regulations regarding this. However, how much portfolio building or exposure generating via speaking at events or offering freebies do you need to do? I would consider that you should actually be quite restrictive. Do not do some blanket, here I'm offering free coaching sessions open to as many people as want it. That is asking for trouble. And in fact, I saw this recently where a photographer offered to do product photography shots, and what the person was asked to do was to send her some product. She would take 20 shots and send them back to the person. The problem with this is she didn't put any limitation on it. She accepted far too many people for a small fee, so she did charge a fee. But the problem was she didn't then deliver. She got sick, apparently quite sick, but the reality was she didn't communicate to anybody. She wasn't communicating, she wasn't delivering, and so that even though it was a small amount, it was still an amount that meant a lot to the people that she targeted. Because guess what? They probably weren't her end customers. They were probably people that would take advantage of that deal and not continue on. Now that might be okay if you are portfolio building and need those photos in your portfolio, but not great if you did it to get new customers that you hoped would stay on with you in the future. A very common form of exposure is speaking at events, speaking on podcasts, offering some sort of freebie. These sort of exposure ideas can help to generate customers, but we've really got to understand some parts of it. Understand the lifetime value of the customer, either that person that you're speaking with and whether there's future opportunities with them, or is there future opportunities from their customer base. This is very important to understand before you start delivering on exposure. My criteria for choosing what I speak at is based on simple logic. I basically ask myself a bunch of questions and make sure that I know the answers before I make a decision. So I do not think exposure doesn't pay or it does pay. I think that every single scenario needs to be looked at individually, because there can be a number of reasons why we offer to speak at events and things for free, and a number of reasons why we would turn them down. So I'm going to run through today my checklist of how I choose how to speak at events. First of all, are you starting out? And do you need to test out your message? This can be a great way to do it in front of an audience that is fairly warm. However, second question, does the audience reflect your ideal customer? No? well then really what is the point speaking to them? Really consider whether the audience is going to be full of your customer base or not, or have access to your customer base. Because if they don't, you could be wasting your time. Will the event be live? Will it be pre-recorded? And if it's live, is it live online or is it live in person? Obviously, this has a factor in the cost involved. So say, for instance, you were invited to speak in an event that was going to be in Puerto Rico and you do not live anywhere near Puerto Rico. Obviously, there'll be huge amounts of cost to going and speaking at Puerto Rico. However, if you are able to speak online, even better, maybe pre-recorded, then why would there be an issue about speaking in Puerto Rico? There wouldn't be. So really do consider that. And the thing is, that's so obvious, right? Because it's so far away. But what if it is an hour away from us? There is still an hour to get to the location, maybe an extra half hour to allow in case there's issues with traffic and finding parking, all that sort of thing in an unfamiliar location. Then another hour or so getting back. You know, you're talking about 2 or 3 hours on top of your speaking time for that gig. And plus, it might be an event which is an all-day thing, for instance. You're speaking at a certain time. And I've had events which run really smoothly to time and others which don't. And the ones that don't, it can really suck for you if you're speaking later in the day, because it can mean that your time gets cut short and your message is the one that's curtailed, which sucks. So do consider the time that you're speaking at, how the event is going to be run. Is it organized by a proper event manager? All that sort of fun stuff. Think about too, are you designing something specifically for the event or are you doing a fairly generic presentation? Personally, if I'm doing the same presentation for the same organization on the same topic, sure, that one might be largely the same. But if I do that presentation for a different organization, I always tailor it to that organization. I do not like presenting the same thing. In fact, often I will actually pitch to them a different variation of that topic. So some of the sections, maybe 25%, maybe half of it are different. But obviously that then is more time for me to do my preparation. So obviously a generic presentation, sure, I can present that quickly and easily. But if there are people in that audience that have already heard it, are they really going to be that interested? So really do think about your audience and what you're delivering to them. Speaking of audience, how many people will be in the audience? I was asked one time to speak to an event on the other side of town, spoken to an event locally with about 25 people at it. And they wanted me to go and speak at the same type of event on the other side of town, an hour and a half away. And there was only going to be about 5 people there. What's the point? Traveling all that way, all that distance for 5 people who are not my ideal customer base? Yeah, that's a hard no. Are they truly your customers? Or are they just coming along for a freebie or a cheap event? Really consider this, because we often speak at events that might be funded or maybe just no cost. They keep the cost down very low because they have got freebie speakers and things like that. Maybe they've got a freebie room. We've just got to be careful about doing those, because if we then wanted to then say sell our message or sell our product, we may not be able to sell anything to that audience because they are looking for freebies. So really consider whether your audience are truly in front of you. Or do those people in the room have access to your audience? Because that can be just as good as the people in the room having the audience. But as long as somebody there in their network has access to the people you need to get in touch with. Will there be any media coverage of the event? Obviously, that would help to get your name out a bit more broadly, and particularly if they are putting your logo up and things like that for the event. I've had some events where I was pitched to be kind of a collaborating partner, but then when the event material goes out, you're not really to be seen, only on some of the material where they were talking about the actual speakers. So do make sure that you have agreed in advance quite clearly how you will be represented. Otherwise, you might find out what you thought you were getting, you're not actually getting. Who is paying for the event to be put on? Has this been funded by an external source like the New South Wales government? Has it been funded by the organisation putting it on? Are attendees buying tickets? Do sponsors pay to sponsor the event? All of these questions are important, because if the event is being funded, then the funds should be used for the event. So there's going to be costs like hiring the space. Is there any catering? Are any of the speakers being paid for? All those sort of things. Is the event raising money for charity? Now, obviously, if the event's raising money for charity, you might decide to give your time freely in support of that charity, because otherwise you're effectively taking funds out of being fundraised for that charity. Is there some other altruistic purpose that you want to be there for? For instance, I have a group that I have gained probably about 600 or 700 clients out of. And so whenever they put something on, I'll more than happily speak at their group for free, because I know I've already reaped a lot of benefit from that group. And I could also do so in the future. What about, would it look good on your resume to speak at this event or to offer this thing for free? Because if it would, that again could be another reason to take part in it. Maybe it could be because you're tied in with an organization that is something that you embody and that you would aspire to be like. Maybe it's a particular person at an event that you can kind of hang off their coattails. I spoke on the same list as this person. That can look good. Does it add something like global status or award-winning to your profile? I spoke at an award-winning conference. I spoke on an international stage. So that's why somebody might even come to me in Australia when they're doing well in America, because at least it is somewhere in Australia. It looks good to say, oh, I've got this global presence. I've spoken in Australia or on an Australian podcast. So people will do that sort of thing, and you'll be quite surprised that people will pitch for something that you think is so small and so unnecessary for them, but they can see other benefits in it. Do they align with your values and your beliefs? This to me is super important. The first thing I ask if they ask to be on my podcast is, what are their values? Do they align with my values? Because if they don't, I don't want them on it. If there's somebody that wants to come on and just spruik something really heavily, that's not going to work for me. I'm happy for them to mention their thing at the end, happy to mention it, very briefly at the start, but that's it. We're not going to dwell on it for hours about how wonderful they are and how wonderful their event is and how you should sign up for it. That's what I'm up for. I want people to feel that if they align with that person, if they feel that person inspires them, to reach out to them, to undertake what they offer, but not to feel it's forced upon them. Very different. What about, is there future paid work with this organization or with opportunities with their audience? Because if there is future opportunities, you might go, okay, one event, might not generate me so much business. 2, 3, 4 events, absolutely might do. So really think about what you're going to get out of this audience and whether there is some value in it to you. Even choosing something like to be on a podcast. I've had international award-winning business coaches, I've had book authors, I've had all sorts of people reach out to be on my podcast, which I found really funny at the time. I'm like, why would they want to be on my little old podcast? Because my podcast is only just starting out. Sure, I hope it gets to big volumes down the track, and if it does, well, maybe it will work for them later. But these people are volunteering to be on my podcast. I'm like, but you've got to look at it. What's in it for them? So is there some benefit, like I said, that global connection? Is it a connection to an audience they perceive down in New South Wales that they want to tap into? So there can be a whole bunch of reasons why they want to do it. They could recognize the fact that I will put it up as a blog as well. Therefore, there'll be some SEO opportunity. So you've got to look at it from a bunch of different perspectives. But let's also look at a recent example I had where I was considering speaking at a conference. I spoke to the events manager. She was really keen. I was really keen. It was all looking good. Then the application came out for speakers. And to say I was horrified was a little bit of an understatement. I could not believe what I was seeing in front of me. I did not expect the speakers to be paid for that particular event, kind of standard for this type of event, to be honest. And so that was pretty to be expected. However, I could not believe it when the speakers didn't get a free ticket to the event. Always when I've been asked to speak at this conference, I've always at least got the free ticket to the event. Okay, so no free ticket to the event. Subsidized ticket to the event, $50 off. Whoop-dee. $50 ain't covering nothing. $50 wouldn't have covered the travel cost for the event. I'm like, really? Really? So I was like, no. But then on top of that, what really irked me and what really put me off the event was the fact that the speaker was paying to speak. The attendees were paying to attend, and therefore, by rights, paying the speaker to speak. The sponsors were also paying for the speaker to speak, because the gold level sponsorship, or whatever the top sponsorship was, included $700 towards speaker payments. And then lower level ones, you could opt to add on a $700 speaker payment. I'm like, what? Where's that money going to? There was one big note speaker, and I'm sure most of the money went there, but still, I was like, really? Then you had exhibitors paying to be at the event as well. And then you had major sponsors, like major sponsors forking out a lot of cash. And you're thinking, wait a minute here. Everyone is putting money in. Where's all the money going? Why should the organizer get everything when everyone else is doing everything for free? Yeah, that just really didn't sit well with me. That made me feel very uncomfortable. And that is where I absolutely won't speak for exposure. And particularly also because I didn't consider the event to be the audience, the true audience that I was targeting. So it was like, yeah, no, that's not for me. So I chose not to speak at that event. However, another event recently I did speak at. In this case, again, the speaker was not paid to speak. They were given a gift of some flowers, which was very pretty. They were given a free ticket to the event. So, you're getting over $150 worth of value for that day. You were also given the opportunity to talk about your session for 2 minutes in the group, which had up to 9,000 people basically could have seen that. Then you had, in addition, the opportunity to speak another time and lead up to the event as well. So there was a lot of opportunity to actually get yourself promoted and to do things. So definitely very different from that first offering. But in addition, this particular conference was aligned with a group that I have generated 600 or 700 clients out of. Therefore, whenever they put something on, I'm always first to stick my hand up and say, sure, I'll speak for you. Because I've got so much out of the group already, I'm more than happy to put more back into the group. So really consider that, what are you getting out of it? Is it a thanks for work that you've had in the past? Is it that promise of work in the future? Well, in this case, it's a bit of both, because I know I've already got a truckload out of that group, but hey, I might get some more in the future too, both of which are good. In that case, I actually chose to be an exhibitor as well, so I did actually end up spending additional money. But you know what? I was more than happy to do so because I have had such success with that group in the past. Consider the lifetime value of the business that can be gained with that organization or with the people that you will be exposed to through that organization. And hence in this one, I already had that lifetime value. It was already very high, and it could only be enhanced by attending. Therefore, I do not consider the issue of exposure to be clear cut. I don't think all exposure for no return is bad. Likewise, I don't think speaking at everything or participating in everything for free is good either. For a new business, some exposure is good to get you quick recognition. There is a limit to it though. So if you are going to offer things like, say, free coaching, then do it to, say, 3 clients. That's it. Put caps on it. Don't end up like the photographer example where she took on way too much and then was absolutely unable to deliver. When considering whether you need to build your portfolio further or to gain some exposure by speaking free at events, consider all these factors I've mentioned today. You can grab a checklist of these features from our blog by signing up to our email list or free to our subscribers. But I do truly believe there is no one answer to the question about whether exposure pays the bills or not. Ultimately, free exposure does nothing at the time, but if it leads to things in the future, it can actually pay the bills. So to finish up, a very quick productivity hack related to this. Remember, you can say no. Not every opportunity is a worthwhile opportunity. And if you're overloaded and you don't have the capacity, then say no, or say no for now. Thank you for tuning in to today's episode of the FAQ Business Podcast. We want to help your business grow, whether it's through exposure or not. Thank you for listening to today's episode of the FAQ Business Podcast. Available on all good podcast services. You can subscribe today via faqbusinesspodcast.com.au or directly on Apple iTunes, iHeartRadio, or Spotify. Subscribe, follow, share, and where able, review our podcast or leave us a comment on either YouTube or our blog page. Thanks for helping us to help you, the small to medium businesses who are growing and want to make a difference. Look forward to connecting with you again on the next episode of the FAQ Business Podcast.